Hey there, it's Courtney with RCK Livestock, where we document our journey to self-sustainability through our garden and our livestock. Today I'm going to show you how we turn this pig fat from the 3 pigs that we raised and butchered in February into rendered lard. So my process is fairly simple. I'm just going to roughly chop this up, run it through the meat grinder, and then put it through the slow cooker for about 24 hours, and then I'll start ladling it out and putting it into jars, and we'll have some pork lard. And I decided to get this done today because this is our last jar of lard that we have right now. So I need to get some going. And then I need to make some room in our freezer for hopefully some wild game that we're going to have this fall. And this isn't all of the fat that we have left. I kept some back for when we do hopefully process those animals. We do add pork fat to the burger and sausage that we make. And I'm just roughly chopping these just into pieces that'll fit through the meat grinder. So yeah, once I'm done with this, I'll show you the next step. So I got the pork fat cut up into decent sized chunks. I didn't do anything specific, I just cut them up. There's bigger sizes, smaller sizes, it doesn't matter for my next step, which is doing the grinding. So this is the part that's more crucial. You're gonna have a better end result the smaller and more even you cut the pieces. So that's why I use the meat grinder, just because 1, it's a lot quicker than spending the time cutting everything, and 2, it just is a consistent product in the end. Now if you don't have a meat grinder, obviously that's perfectly fine. I would just not use perfectly or completely thawed fat. I would let it thaw for a little bit from the freezer, and then start cutting it up into those smaller chunks, about as small as you can consistently, but about a 1/2 inch square is perfectly fine. So I'm gonna get the grinder put together, and we're gonna see if we can fit everything in the crock pot. And we do have a Lem meat grinder. This is, I don't know exactly what size, I think it's the number 8 grinder. And this is pretty much the smallest complete stainless steel grinder from Lem that you can find, and it's done just fine for everything we've ever needed it to do. So I've got the grinder set up. This is just the insert for my crock pot. I just don't want to have to transfer it from a bowl into the crock pot, so I'm going to grind right into it. Now I do have a little bit of water. I don't know if you can really see that, but I do have a couple tablespoons of water just in the bottom, so then as it starts rendering down, it doesn't burn the bottom. So I've got that going. It's probably going to be a little loud starting off. And you're just going to dump in your fat. Okay, there's some of the fat. And we're going to kick it on. So we've got the fat in the crock pot. I'm going to go ahead and just turn it on as low as I can get it. It'll run through the cycle, and I'll have to reset it after 10 hours. But I'll just gradually stir this. I'll give you some updates as we go. But this is about half of the fat, and we'll see how far it gets us. All right, so we're about an hour and a half in, and you can already see some good reducing down. You can kind of see how everything's chunking up and melting well. And this is not a process that you want to rush. You want it to just go nice and slow. Stir it every once in a while. And the reason you want to go nice and slow with it is because the slower you go, the more pure of a product you'll get. And you won't get the burning. It won't necessarily burn, but it'll get a yellow tinge to it. And it'll have kind of a, what people refer to as like a piggy flavor. It tastes more like meat rather than a neutral fat. So we're just gonna let it keep going. Alright, so we've got about 4 hours left, and we're ready to move on to the next step. So we do still have some fat rendering down, but there is a lot ready to go. So now that we have quite a bit of fat that's rendered down, we're gonna go ahead and ladle it into our jars. What I usually do, I'll show you, but I take the funnel that I use for my canning jars, and then I put a strainer over that with a coffee filter, just so I can get all those little bits of fat to keep everything pure and just lard in the jars. Okay, so this is obviously gonna be super hot since we're working with melted fat. So I've got a towel right here. We've got our clean jar, and then I've got the funnel that I use for canning, and I'll go ahead and put a strainer over that. And then we're going to go through quite a few coffee filters. And we're just going to set the coffee filter in there. And we'll just ladle in the fat. So it is kind of a slow process with straining everything, but you end up with a super clean result. So we've got 3 jars full of rendered lard. We're gonna let that cool overnight, and then I'll show you how it looks in the morning. It usually takes 12 to 24 hours for it to fully set up and, you know, completely turn white. And then if you, like I said, if you don't go through that straining process, you'll just get more particles in there rather than it just being pure fat in there. So it's kind of dependent on your application. If you want to be able to bake with it, you're going to want it more pure. And if you don't really care, like if you're just doing normal cooking with it, cooking meats and things like that, then it's really not that big of a deal. But I just like to have the option to do what I want with it. So I'll show you what it looks like now. We do still have a bunch more fat that needs rendered down. So this is what it looks like. This is what we're looking like now. You can see that it started way up here, and that's how much it's reduced down to. Plus we've got 3 jars worth of fat out of it. Obviously it's a lot thicker now. We've got all the liquid out, or at least most of it. So we're going to let it render down. I'm going to add more of the fat that we ground up, and we'll let it keep going. Hey guys, so it's been a couple days since we did the rendered lard. I got sidetracked. I was working on that on a Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday hit and we were just running out and around. Sorry, that's my washing machine. So I was able to get everything finished, but I didn't have time to pick up the camera. It was just kind of a, as we made it through the day, process of getting everything done. So let me flip you around and show you what our final result is. So this is what we've got finalized for everything. We've got, and this is what I use my pasta jars for. I don't ever like to throw them away, but obviously you can't can with them. So I like to store dry goods and lard with it. So we've got 5 about pint and a half jars. And then I've got just some kind of random size jars and then 1 pint. So what is that? 9 total jars of rendered pork fat. And then this right here is the cracklings that you end up with afterwards. So what I did as far as straining goes, once I got most of the lard out with the coffee filters, I replaced the coffee filters with a piece of cheesecloth that was folded over a few times, and then just took full scoops with the fat and everything and dumped it onto the cheesecloth that was running over the jar. And then once that was finished, I took those fat pieces, put them on that parchment paper, sprinkled it with salt, and then put it in the fridge to let it kind of dry out. And we'll use those on top of salads. I'll use it in things like cornbread I've heard of people using, and just little things like that, more of like a condiment than anything. With the fat that we do strain off of in the cheesecloth, I like to put those in separate jars. So I think this jar was one of the last jars I did, and then this jar I believe was one of the last ones I did. It's not a super big difference, I can't really tell, but it does have a little bit more of a darker color than the stuff that I strained with the coffee filter. So we'll just make sure to use that stuff for cooking instead of baking, but it shouldn't make it too big of a difference either way. But I just wanted to pop on. I had these jars of lard sitting on my counter so I didn't forget to finish recording the rest of this video. I appreciate you guys sticking around. I hope you learned something. If you guys have any questions about rendering pork fat or anything like that, just drop a comment down below, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.